The sun was setting over the quiet town of Maple Ridge, casting long shadows across its empty streets. It wasn't a bustling place by any means, just a collection of small houses, farms, and shops surrounded by endless fields of corn and wheat. Life here moved slowly, almost lazily, with nothing much to disturb the peace. That is, until tonight. Far above the horizon, something unusual caught the eye of Alex Carter as he stood on the porch of his mechanic shop. At first, it looked like a shooting star streaking through the sky. But then it slowed down, hovering silently before descending toward the outskirts of town. The object glowed faintly, pulsating with an eerie light that didn't belong to anything human-made. Alex squinted, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Whatever it wasn't natural. Word spread quickly in Maple Ridge. Within minutes, curious townsfolk gathered near the edge of town where the strange craft had landed. People whispered nervously among themselves, pointing at the glowing shape now resting in an open field. Some were excited, others scared, but everyone felt the same thing: awe. This was no ordinary event. Something, or someone, from beyond Earth had arrived. Among the crowd was Emily Dawson, a young woman who helped her father run their family farm just a mile away from the landing site. She clutched her jacket tightly around her shoulders, partly because of the cool evening breeze and partly because she couldn't shake the feeling of unease creeping up her spine. Still, she couldn't look away. There was something mesmerizing about the sight, a mix of wonder and fear that made her heart race. As people muttered theories about aliens or government experiments, a loud hum filled the air. The glow intensified and a section of the craft began to shift. A ramp extended, downward, touching the ground with a soft thud. Everyone held their breath, waiting to see what would emerge. Out stepped a figure unlike anything anyone had ever seen. It stood nearly 8 feet tall, its body covered in a shimmering exoskeleton that reflected the dim light. Its limbs were long and jointed, ending in claw-like appendages. 2 large, multifaceted eyes dominated its face, glowing faintly red. Behind it trailed smaller figures, shorter and more humanoid in appearance, carrying devices that emitted soft beeping sounds. At the center of it all was the leader, an imposing alien whose presence demanded attention. His armor gleamed brighter than the rest, adorned with intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with energy. Around his neck hung a device that projected a holographic translator, allowing him to communicate in broken but understandable English. "I am Commander Vrax," the creature announced, his voice deep and metallic. "We mean no harm." Despite his words, there was tension in his tone, and his movements were sharp, almost frantic. He scanned the crowd with those piercing red eyes, as if searching for something, or someone. Then he turned to one of his subordinates, speaking rapidly, in a language no one could understand. The subordinate nodded and hurried back inside the ship. Alex noticed this exchange and frowned. Something about the way Vrax carried himself suggested he wasn't entirely truthful. Sure, he claimed they meant no harm, but his actions told a different story. Why had they landed here? What were they looking for? And why did Vrax seem so agitated? While the crowd murmured amongst themselves, Emily took a step forward, her curiosity outweighing her fear. "What are you doing here?" she called out, her voice trembling slightly. Vrax tilted his head, his glowing eyes narrowing as he studied her. For a moment, he didn't respond. Then, through the translator, he said, "Our mission is classified. You must leave this area immediately." His words sent a ripple of unease through the crowd. Classified? What kind of mission required secrecy, and why land in the middle of nowhere? Before anyone could ask more questions, a loud clang echoed from within the ship. Vrax's posture stiffened, and he barked orders to his crew in their alien tongue. They scrambled to obey, disappearing back inside the vessel. "What's going on?" someone shouted from the crowd. Vrax ignored them, his focus entirely on the ship. Moments later, another alien emerged, dragging what appeared to be a large metal container. The box was dented and scorched, clearly damaged. Sparks flew from its surface, and a low hissing sound emanated from within. Whatever was inside, it wasn't happy. "Containment breach," one of the aliens yelled, though the translator distorted the words into something barely intelligible. Panic flashed across Vrax's face, or at least what passed for a face under that armored exoskeleton. He gestured furiously at his crew, ordering them to secure the container. But it was too late. With a deafening roar, the lid of the box burst open, and a blur of movement shot out into the night. Chaos erupted. People screamed and scattered, running in every direction as the creature vanished into the darkness. Even Vrax's soldiers struggled to regain control, firing beams of energy into the air in a futile attempt to track it down. Within seconds, the field was empty, except for the alien commander and his shaken crew. Alex, who had ducked behind a tree during the commotion, peeked out cautiously. He saw Vrax pacing back and forth, muttering angrily to himself. Whatever that thing was, it was clear it posed a serious threat. And judging by the urgency in Vrax's movements, it wasn't going to stay hidden for long. Back at the edge of the field, Emily hesitated. She wanted to run home, to put as much distance between herself and the alien ship as possible. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the lingering sense of curiosity, or maybe it was the nagging feeling that whatever had escaped might need help. Either way, she couldn't bring herself to leave just yet. Little did she know her decision would change everything, for better or worse. The night grew darker as Emily finally decided to head back toward her family's farm. Her mind was racing with questions about what she had just witnessed. The glowing ship, the towering alien commander, and the mysterious creature that had escaped. It all felt like something out of a movie. But this wasn't fiction. It was real, and it had happened right in front of her eyes. As she walked along the narrow dirt path leading away from the field, she couldn't shake the feeling that something important was still lingering nearby. About halfway home, Emily heard a faint whimper coming from the shadows beneath a large oak tree. At first, she thought it might be one of the neighbor's dogs lost in the chaos. She slowed her pace, peering into the darkness. What she saw made her stop completely. There, curled up under the tree, was an animal unlike anything she'd ever seen before. It looked like a mix between a wolf and some kind of reptile, with sleek gray scales covering its body and sharp claws peeking out from its paws. Its tail twitched nervously, and its golden eyes shone brightly even in the dim moonlight. Despite its strange appearance, there was something oddly endearing about it. It seemed scared, cowering as if it didn't know where it was or what to do next. Emily hesitated for a moment. Her instincts told her to keep moving, to get as far away from anything connected to the aliens as possible. But then the creature let out another soft whimper, and her heart melted. Slowly, she knelt down, holding out her hand cautiously. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice gentle. "I won't hurt you." The creature tilted its head, studying her with those piercing golden eyes. After a few tense seconds, it crept forward, sniffing her fingers. Emily held her breath, half expecting it to snap at her or bolt away. Instead, it nudged her hand lightly, almost like a dog looking for affection. A smile spread across Emily's face despite herself. "You're not so scary after all, are you?" She glanced around, making sure no one else was watching. The last thing she needed was someone reporting her for harboring an alien pet. Satisfied that they were alone, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a granola bar she had been saving for later. Breaking off a small piece, she offered it to the creature. It sniffed the food curiously before gobbling it up eagerly. "Well, I guess that settles it," Emily said softly. "You're coming home with me." Back at the crash site, Alex Carter was still hiding behind the tree, trying to process everything he had seen. He had always been fascinated by the idea of extraterrestrial life, but nothing could have prepared him for tonight. The aliens weren't just visiting, they were searching for something. And whatever it was, it had slipped through their grasp as the crowd dispersed and the aliens began packing up their equipment. Alex noticed Commander Vrax speaking urgently with one of his subordinates. Their voices were low, but the translator device occasionally picked up fragments of their conversation. "Must locate it before sunrise." Vrax growled, his tone sharp with frustration. "Cannot allow it to adapt." Alex frowned, piecing together what little he understood. Adapt? To what? And why did Vrak seem so desperate to find the creature? Whatever it was, it clearly wasn't friendly, or at least not according to the aliens. His curiosity got the better of him. While the rest of the townsfolk retreated to their homes, Alex stayed behind, keeping a safe distance from the ship as he listened intently. Eventually, Vrax turned his attention to the damaged containment unit, inspecting it closely. His antennae-like appendages twitched angrily as he muttered something under his breath. "This is unacceptable," he snapped, addressing his crew. "If we fail to retrieve it, the consequences will be catastrophic." Catastrophic? Alex's brow furrowed deeper. What exactly were they dealing with here? A dangerous weapon? An experiment gone wrong? He wished he could get closer, but the AOE risk of being spotted was too high. For now, all he could do was observe and hope answers would come soon. When Emily arrived back at the farm, she led the creature straight to the barn. Her father, John Dawson, was already asleep in the house, so she knew she had time to figure things out without raising suspicion. She found an old blanket and spread it across the hay-strewn floor, creating a makeshift bed for her new companion. "There you go," she said, patting the blanket invitingly. "Make yourself comfortable." The creature looked at her quizzically for a moment before curling up on the blanket. It yawned, revealing rows of sharp teeth, but its expression softened almost instantly. Within minutes, it was fast asleep, its chest rising and falling steadily. Emily sat cross-legged beside it, studying its features more closely. Up close, it was even stranger than she had realized. Its scales shimmered faintly in the moonlight, streaming through the barn window, and its ears, long and pointed, twitched occasionally, as if listening to distant sounds. Despite its intimidating appearance, it seemed harmless enough. In fact, it reminded her of a puppy, albeit a very unusual one. "I'll call you Spike," she murmured, smiling as she gently scratched behind its ear. "How does that sound?" Spike cracked open one eye, gazing at her sleepily before closing it again. Emily chuckled softly. "Guess that means you approve." As she sat there, her thoughts drifted back to the aliens. Why had they been so frantic to catch Spike? Was he dangerous? Or were they simply trying to protect him? She didn't have any answers, but one thing was clear. Spike wasn't going anywhere, not if she had anything to say about it. The next morning, Alex woke up early, unable to shake the events of the previous night from his mind. He grabbed a cup of coffee and headed outside, hoping to clear his head. But instead of peace and quiet, he found chaos brewing once again. Military vehicles lined the streets near the crash site, their lights flashing ominously. Soldiers in full gear moved about, setting up barriers and questioning residents. Word had spread quickly about the alien landing, and authorities were wasting no time taking control of the situation. Alex approached cautiously, blending into the growing crowd of onlookers. He overheard snippets of conversation between soldiers and civilians piecing together bits of information. Apparently, the government had been aware of the alien presence long before the ship touched down. Now they were working alongside the aliens, or at least pretending to contain the situation. 1. Soldier caught Alex's attention. He was younger than the others, his uniform slightly rumpled as if he hadn't slept in days. He spoke animatedly to a group of townsfolk, explaining that the escaped creature posed a significant threat. "It's highly adaptable," the soldier said, his tone serious. "If it isn't contained soon, it could become uncontrollable. We need everyone's cooperation to ensure public safety." Uncontrollable? Alex's stomach churned. That didn't sound good. He glanced toward the woods where the creature had disappeared, wondering how much truth there was to the soldiers' warning. If the aliens were this worried, then maybe the creature really was dangerous. Or maybe they were exaggerating to cover their own tracks. Either way, Alex couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that he needed to see the creature for himself. Something about the whole situation didn't add up, and he was determined to find out why. Meanwhile, Emily woke up to find Spike waiting patiently outside the barn door. His golden eyes sparkled with mischief as he wagged his tail enthusiastically. Clearly, he was ready for breakfast. Laughing, Emily fetched some scraps from the kitchen and brought them out to him. Spike devoured the food eagerly, licking her fingers clean afterward. Watching him, Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of joy she hadn't experienced in years. There was something magical about having such a unique companion, even if he came from outer space. But as the day wore on, Emily began noticing subtle signs that Spike wasn't entirely ordinary. Whenever she spoke to him, he seemed to understand her perfectly, responding with tilts of his head or excited barks. When she played fetch with an old stick, he retrieved it with uncanny speed, leaping over obstacles with ease. And when a loud noise startled her, Spike growled low in his throat, his eyes narrowing as if preparing to defend her. These moments were fleeting, but they left Emily unsettled. Spike was intelligent, far more intelligent than any animal she had ever encountered. Could he really be just a stray? Or was he something far more complex? Despite her doubts, Emily couldn't bring herself to turn him away. Whether he was a gift from the stars or a ticking time bomb, he was hers now, and she would protect him no matter what. The days that followed were a strange mix of normalcy and unease for Emily Dawson. On the surface, life at the farm continued as it always had. She woke up early to tend to the animals, helped her father with chores, and spent quiet evenings, reading by the fire. But beneath the routine lay a growing tension, both in the town and within herself. Spike had quickly become part of the family, though Emily kept him hidden from prying eyes. During the day, he stayed in the barn, where she brought him food and water. At night, when the house was quiet, she let him roam freely around the property. He seemed content enough, playing with sticks, chasing shadows, and curling up beside her whenever she sat down. To anyone watching, Spike might have looked like an oversized pet, but Emily knew better. There was something extraordinary about him, something she couldn't quite put into words. For one thing, Spike's intelligence was off the charts. He didn't just respond to commands, he anticipated them. If Emily reached for the door handle, he would already be waiting outside, before she even opened it. When she dropped something by accident, he'd retrieve it before she could bend down. It was almost as if he understood not just what she said, but what she was thinking. And then there were the times when he did things that defied explanation, like opening gates on his own or nudging tools into place when she needed them most. At first, Emily tried to rationalize these moments. Maybe Spike was just unusually smart, or maybe she was imagining things because of everything that had happened. But deep down, she knew the truth. Spike wasn't an ordinary animal. He was something far more complex, and possibly far more dangerous. Meanwhile, Alex Carter found himself drawn back to the crash site time and again. The military presence had only grown stronger since the initial landing, with soldiers setting up checkpoints and conducting sweeps through the surrounding woods. They claimed they were searching for the escaped creature, but Alex suspected there was more to their mission than they were letting on. One afternoon, while pretending to fix a neighbor's tractor near the edge of town, Alex overheard two soldiers talking. Their voices were low, but he caught enough to raise his suspicions. "Commander Vrax is losing patience," one of them said. "He says if we don't find it soon, he'll take matters into his own hands." "And what does that mean?" the other soldier asked nervously. "It means collateral damage," came the grim reply. "He doesn't care about this town or its people. All he cares about is recovering the specimen." Alex's heart sank. Specimen? So the creature wasn't just some random escapee. It was being hunted specifically, and judging by the tone of the conversation, Vrax wasn't above using force to get what he wanted. As the soldiers walked away, Alex slipped into the woods, determined to learn more. He moved quietly, avoiding the patrols and sticking to the shadows. After a while, he stumbled upon a clearing where several alien drones hovered silently above the ground. They emitted soft beeping sounds as they scanned the area, their red lenses sweeping back and forth like mechanical eyes. Alex ducked behind a tree, watching intently. Nearby, Commander Vrax stood arguing with another alien officer. From what Alex could gather, they were debating the best way to track down the creature. Vrax seemed furious, his exoskeleton gleaming menacingly under the sunlight. "This planet's environment is accelerating its growth," Vrax growled, his voice distorted slightly by the translator. Every hour it remains free increases the risk of failure. The other alien nodded hesitantly. We should consider deploying the retrieval squad immediately. No, Vrack snapped. They lack subtlety. If we act too aggressively, the humans will interfere. We must proceed carefully. Carefully? Alex frowned. That didn't sound like someone who cared about keeping things peaceful. Whatever Vrax's plan was, it clearly involved deception, and possibly violence. Back at the farm, Emily noticed subtle changes in Spike's behavior. At first, it was small things, his golden eyes glowing faintly in the dark, his scales shimmering with an iridescent hue when touched by moonlight. Then came the growls. Whenever a distant noise startled him, Spike would let out a low guttural sound that sent shivers down Emily's spine. It wasn't the playful bark of a dog or the warning growl of a protective animal. It was deeper, angrier, almost primal. One evening, as Emily sat on the porch watching the sunset, Spike suddenly bolted upright, his ears perked and his tail stiff. He stared intently at the tree line, his body coiled like a spring ready to leap. Emily followed his gaze but saw nothing unusual. "What is it, boy?" she asked softly, placing a hand on his back. "Do you hear something?" Spike didn't respond. Instead, he let out a sharp bark and took off running toward the woods. Emily hesitated for a moment before chasing after him, calling his name. By the time she reached the edge of the trees, Spike had vanished into the darkness. "Spike!" she called again, her voice tinged with panic. "Come back." There was no answer, just the rustling of leaves and the faint hoot of an owl in the distance. Emily sighed, rubbing her arms against the cool night air. She told herself Spike would return eventually, he always did. But as she headed back to the house, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Later that same night, Alex decided to pay Emily a visit. He hadn't seen her since the alien landing, and he was curious about how she was handling everything. Plus, he figured she might know something useful. After all, her farm was close to the crash site, and she had been there when the creature escaped. When he arrived, he found Emily sitting alone in the kitchen, staring absent-mindedly at a cup of tea. She looked tired, her usual bright smile replaced by a worried frown. "Hey," Alex said gently, stepping inside. "Mind if I join you?" Emily glanced up, surprised to see him. "Oh, hey, Alex, sure, come in." They sat in silence for a while, the weight of recent events hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Alex spoke. "How are you holding up?" he asked. Emily shrugged. "Okay, I guess. Things have been weird." "Weird how?" She hesitated, glancing toward the barn. "I don't know, just stuff happening around here. Strange noises, missing livestock. Nothing major, but it's enough to make me nervous." Alex nodded slowly. "You think it has anything to do with, the aliens?" "I don't know," Emily admitted. "Maybe. But honestly, I'm more worried about Spike." "Spike?" Alex raised an eyebrow. "Who's Spike?" Emily bit her lip, unsure whether to tell him the truth. In the end, curiosity got the better of her. He's kind of hard to explain. Do you remember that night when the aliens landed? When that thing escaped from their ship? Alex nodded cautiously. "Yeah, I remember." "Well," Emily paused, choosing her words carefully. "I found him in the woods that night. He was scared and hurt, so I brought him home. Ever since then, he's been staying with me." Alex stared at her, stunned. "You're telling me you've been hiding the alien creature?" "He's not a creature," Emily shot back defensively. "He's sweet and loyal and potentially dangerous," Alex interrupted. "Emily, those aliens are looking for him for a reason. Whatever he is, he's not just some stray dog." "I know that," Emily said quietly. "But he's also not what they say he is. He's smarter than any animal I've ever met, Alex, smarter than most people. And he's never done anything to hurt me or anyone else." Alex sighed, running a hand through his hair. As much as he admired Emily's kindness, he couldn't ignore the risks. "Look, I get it. You care about him. But you need to understand. What we're dealing with here, those aliens aren't messing around. If they find out you've got him, they won't, Emily insisted. I'm careful. Besides, Spike trusts me. He wouldn't let anything happen to me or to anyone else. Alex wanted to argue further, but something in Emily's voice stopped him. She truly believed what she was saying, and he couldn't fault her for that. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that trouble was brewing, and sooner or later it would come knocking on their door. That night, as Emily lay in bed, she replayed the conversation with Alex over and over in her mind. Was she being reckless? Should she turn Spike over to the authorities or even the aliens? Every instinct told her no. Despite his mysterious origins, Spike felt like family now, and deep down she believed he deserved a chance to prove himself. Little did she know that chance would come sooner than expected. Far away in the woods, unseen forces were gathering, preparing for a confrontation that would change everything. For Emily, for Alex, and for the entire town of Maple Ridge. The days that followed were a blur of unease for the people of Maple Ridge. Strange occurrences began to pile up, each one more unsettling than the last. Livestock started disappearing overnight, leaving behind only faint claw marks on the ground, and shredded remains of fences. Trees near the woods bore deep gouges as if something massive had clawed at their trunks in anger or frustration. Even the air seemed heavier, charged with an invisible tension that made everyone uneasy. At first, the townsfolk blamed wild animals, a bear or a pack of coyotes gone rogue. But Alex Carter wasn't convinced. He had seen too much during his trips to the crash site to believe it was just wildlife causing the chaos. The claw marks were too large, too precise, and there was no scent of blood where the livestock vanished. Just an eerie silence that lingered long after the event. One morning, Alex decided to visit Emily again. He hadn't told anyone about Spike, not even his closest friends, but he couldn't shake the feeling that Emily's mysterious pet might be connected to the strange happenings around town. If Spike really was the creature the aliens were hunting, then keeping him hidden wasn't just risky. It could put the entire town in danger. When Alex arrived at the Dawson farm, he found Emily outside, sweeping the porch. She looked tired, her face pale and drawn. There were dark circles under her eyes, and she barely acknowledged him as he approached. "Hey," Alex said softly, climbing the steps to join her. "You okay?" Emily forced a smile but didn't meet his gaze. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just tired." Alex studied her for a moment before speaking again. "Anything unusual happen here lately?" Emily hesitated, gripping the broom tightly. "Why do you ask?" "Because things are getting weird around town," Alex replied. "Livestock, going missing, trees torn apart. People are starting to get scared." Emily swallowed hard, glancing toward the barn. For a brief second, Alex thought she might deny knowing anything. But then she sighed and set the broom aside. "Come on," she said quietly, leading him toward the barn. "There's something you should see." Inside, Spike was lying on his blanket, chewing on a piece of wood. At the sound of their footsteps, he lifted his head, his golden eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. When he saw Alex, he let out a low growl, his tail stiffening. "It's okay, Spike," Emily said soothingly, kneeling beside him. "This is Alex. He's a friend." Spike tilted his head, studying Alex with an intensity that made the mechanic feel like he was being sized up. After a moment, the creature relaxed slightly, though his eyes never left Alex's face. "So this is Spike," Alex murmured, taking a cautious step forward. "He's bigger than I expected." "That's not all," Emily admitted. "Lately, he's been acting different, more aggressive. Last night I heard him growling at something outside. When I went to check, there were claw marks on the fence, like these." She pointed to the wooden beams lining the barn wall where deep gashes marred the surface. Alex examined the marks closely, his stomach sinking. They matched the ones he'd seen in the woods. "Emily, you realize what this means, right? Spike isn't just some stray dog. He's dangerous." "No, he's not," Emily snapped, her voice rising. He's never hurt me or anyone else. He's protective, sure, but that doesn't make him a monster. Alex held up his hands, trying to calm her down. I'm not saying he's evil, but you have to admit he's not normal. Look at him, he's growing faster every day. Those aliens weren't lying when they said he adapts quickly. What happens when he gets too big to control? Emily didn't answer. Instead, she turned back to Spike, running her fingers gently over his scales. He leaned into her touch, closing his eyes contentedly. Watching them together, Alex couldn't help but feel conflicted. On one hand, Spike did seem loyal to Emily. On the other, Alex knew better than to trust appearances. This wasn't just a pet, it was a living weapon designed by beings far smarter and far less compassionate than humans. Later that evening, Alex returned home, his mind racing. He wanted to believe Emily when she said Spike was harmless, but the evidence suggested otherwise. The claw marks, the missing animals, the way Spike had grown so rapidly, it all pointed to one conclusion. The creature was changing, evolving, into something far more powerful than anyone anticipated. As he sat on his porch staring out at the darkening sky, Alex noticed movement in the distance. Squinting, he realized it was a group of alien drones hovering near the edge of the woods. Their red lenses scanned the area methodically, searching for something or someone. Alex ducked behind a tree, watching as Commander Vrax emerged from the shadows, flanked by two of his soldiers. We're running out of time, Vrax growled, his voice sharp with frustration. Every hour it remains free increases the risk of exposure. We must act now. One of the soldiers nodded nervously. Sir, the humans are becoming suspicious. If we escalate our efforts, if we don't, the consequences will be far worse, Vrax interrupted. This planet cannot handle what it has unleashed. Retrieve the specimen or destroy it. Those are your orders. Destroy it? Alex's heart sank. So much for subtlety. Vrax clearly had no qualms about using force to get what he wanted, and if Spike resisted, there was no telling how far the aliens would go to eliminate him. Back at the farm, Emily struggled to sleep. Every creak of the house, every rustle of leaves outside made her jump. Part of her wondered if Alex was right, if Spike really was a threat she couldn't control. But another part of her refused to believe it. Spike had shown her nothing but kindness, loyalty, and affection. How could something so gentle also be dangerous? Her thoughts were interrupted by a loud crash coming from the barn. Heart pounding, Emily grabbed a flashlight and hurried outside. When she reached the barn door, she froze. Spike was pacing back and forth, his body tense and his claws scraping against the wooden floor. His golden eyes glowed brighter than ever, and his growls echoed through the night. Spike? Emily whispered, stepping cautiously inside. What's wrong? Before she could reach him, Spike lunged toward the barn door, knocking it open with a single swipe of his paw. Outside, the air was thick with tension. In the distance, Emily could see flashes of light, alien drones scanning the fields, their red lenses cutting through the darkness like lasers. No, Emily breathed, realizing what was happening. They've found us. Spike let out a deafening roar, his body trembling with energy. Without warning, he bolted into the night, heading straight for the woods. Emily called after him, but he was already gone, disappearing into the shadows. The next morning, word spread quickly through Maple Ridge about the latest incident. Several residents reported seeing strange lights in the sky, accompanied by loud noises and flashes of energy. By the time Alex arrived at Emily's farm, she was sitting on the porch, her face pale and her hands shaking. He's gone, she said before Alex could even ask. Spike ran off last night. I think the aliens found him. Alex sat down beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. Did you see what happened? Emily shook her head. Not really. I heard him growl and then he took off. I tried to follow him, but he was too fast. Alex frowned, thinking back to what he had overheard the previous night. If Vrax was serious about retrieving or destroying Spike, then the creature was in serious trouble. And if Emily cared about him as much as she claimed, they needed to find him before the aliens did. "We need to look for him," Alex said firmly. "If we don't, they'll catch him, or worse." Emily nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I know. But where do we even start?" Alex stood up, determination hardening his expression. "We start in the woods. That's where he went. And if anyone can track him, it's us." Together they grabbed flashlights and supplies and headed into the forest, following the faint trail of broken branches and disturbed earth left behind by Spike's hasty escape. As they walked, Emily couldn't help but wonder if they were making a mistake. What if Spike didn't want to be found? What if he was already too powerful to control? But deep down, she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't abandon him. Not ever. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. The woods were eerily quiet as Alex and Emily ventured deeper, their flashlights cutting narrow beams through the dense canopy of trees. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating, and every step seemed to echo louder than it should have. Neither of them spoke much. They were too focused on finding Spike and too afraid of what might happen if they didn't find him first. Emily led the way, her eyes scanning the ground for any sign of disturbance. Broken twigs, flattened grass, claw, marks on tree trunks, all clues that could lead them to Spike. But the further they went, the more unsettled she became. Something about the forest felt wrong. It wasn't just the oppressive silence or the strange shadows cast by their flashlights. It was as if the woods themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. "Do you think he's okay?" Emily finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alex hesitated before answering. "I don't know. If he's smart like you say he is, maybe he's trying to stay hidden. But if those aliens are looking for him..." He didn't finish the thought. He didn't need to. Emily already knew what he meant. If Vrax caught up with Spike, there was no telling what would happen. Would they try to capture him? Or would they follow through on their threat to destroy him? They pressed on, moving cautiously but quickly. Time was not on their side. Every second they wasted gave the aliens another chance to close in, and judging by the flashes of light they occasionally saw flickering between the trees, the aliens weren't far behind. After nearly an hour of searching, they stumbled upon a clearing where the evidence was impossible to ignore. The ground was torn apart, chunks of earth scattered everywhere like someone or something had been digging furiously. Nearby, the trunk of a massive oak tree had been shredded, its bark reduced to splinters. In the center of the chaos stood Spike, or at least what used to be Spike. Emily gasped, her flashlight trembling in her hand. Spike was no longer the sleek, puppy-like creature she had taken in days ago. His body had grown significantly larger, his scales now gleaming with an almost metallic sheen. His claws looked sharper, longer, and his golden eyes burned with an intensity that made her chest tighten. He was pacing back and forth, his movements fluid yet powerful, as if he were testing his newfound strength. "Spike!" Emily called, stepping forward despite her fear. At the sound of her voice, Spike froze. For a moment he stared at her, his glowing eyes filled with something that looked like recognition. Then, without warning, he let out a low growl, his tail stiffening as he turned his attention toward the edge of the clearing. That's when they heard it, the hum of alien technology growing louder with each passing second. Commander Vrax emerged from the trees, flanked by a squad of armored soldiers. Their weapons glowed faintly, charged with energy ready to fire. Vrax's exoskeleton shimmered menacingly in the dim light, and his red eyes locked onto Spike with cold determination. "There," Vrax said, his translator device distorting his voice slightly. "Contain it immediately." Before anyone could react, Spike roared, a sound so deafening it shook the very ground beneath their feet. The force of it sent leaves spiraling into the air and knocked several of the alien soldiers off balance. Vrax remained steady, raising one clawed hand to signal his troops, "Fire!" he commanded. Energy blasts erupted from the soldiers' weapons, striking the ground around Spike. He dodged most of them with surprising agility, weaving between the attacks as if anticipating their every move. When one blast grazed his side, leaving a scorch mark on his scales, Spike retaliated with a burst of raw power. A shockwave rippled outward from his body, knocking the soldiers backward and sending Vrax stumbling. Emily watched in horror, torn between running to Spike and staying safe. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. This wasn't the same gentle creature who had curled up beside her on the barn floor. This was something else entirely, a monster unleashed. But even as fear gripped her heart, she noticed something important. Despite his transformation, Spike wasn't attacking indiscriminately. He was defending himself, not lashing out. And when his gaze shifted briefly to Emily, she saw a flicker of the loyalty and affection he had shown her before. "He's not evil," she whispered to Alex, clutching his arm tightly. "They're the ones provoking him." Alex didn't respond. His focus was on Vrax, who was barking orders to his soldiers while pulling out a small device from his belt. It looked like a remote control, but Alex guessed it was far more dangerous. Whatever it was, Vrax clearly intended to use it against Spike. "We can't let them hurt him," Emily said firmly, stepping forward despite Alex's protests. "Stop this. Leave him alone." Vrax turned his attention to her, his expression unreadable beneath his armored exoskeleton. "You dare interfere? This creature is a weapon, an abomination created for destruction. It does not belong here. He doesn't belong to you either." Emily shot back, her voice rising. "He's not your property. You can't just take him or kill him because it's convenient for you." For a moment, Vrax seemed taken aback by her defiance. Then his antennae twitched irritably, and he raised the device in his hand. "Your ignorance will cost you, dearly human." Before he could activate it, Spike lunged forward, placing himself squarely between Emily and the alien commander. His posture was protective, his growl deep and guttural. It was clear whose side he was on. The standoff lasted only seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Vrax glared at Spike, his frustration boiling over. "Enough of this." He pressed a button on the device, and a high-pitched whine filled the air. Spike staggered, clutching his head with both paws. His growls turned to whimpers as the sound overwhelmed him. Emily cried out, rushing toward him instinctively. Alex grabbed her arm, pulling her back just in time to avoid a stray energy blast from one of the soldiers. "No!" Emily screamed, struggling against Alex's grip. "Let me go. They're hurting him." "I know," Alex said grimly, holding her steady. "But we can't help him if we get ourselves killed." As Spike writhed in pain, Vrax advanced slowly, his weapon trained on the creature. "You cannot resist forever," he declared. "Submit, or be destroyed." To everyone's surprise, Spike suddenly surged to his feet, shaking off the effects of the device. His golden eyes blazed with fury, and he let out another ear-splitting roar. This time, however, the sound carried something new, a resonance that seemed to reverberate through the entire forest. Trees swayed violently, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. Vrax stumbled backward, his composure cracking for the first time. "Impossible," he muttered, staring at Spike in disbelief. Seizing the opportunity, Alex tugged Emily toward the edge of the clearing. "We need to move, now." "But we can't leave him," Emily protested, tears streaming down her face. "We're not leaving," Alex assured her. "We're buying him time. Follow me." With one last glance at Spike, who was now circling Vrax and his soldiers like a predator sizing up its prey, Emily reluctantly followed Alex into the trees. They ran as fast as they could, putting as much distance between themselves and the battle as possible. Behind them, the sounds of conflict grew louder. Roars, explosions, and the hum of alien technology clashing in a symphony of chaos. Emily prayed silently that Spike would survive. No matter how much he had changed, she couldn't bear the thought of losing him. When they finally stopped to catch their breath, Alex turned to Emily, his expression grim. "We can't stay here. If Vrax loses control of the situation, he won't hesitate to bring the full force of his ship down on this area. We need to warn the town." Emily nodded, though her heart ached at the idea of leaving Spike behind. What about him? What happens if they capture him? Alex hesitated, unsure how to answer. "If we're lucky, he'll escape again. If not..." He trailed off, unwilling to say the words aloud. Emily clenched her fists, resolve hardening in her chest. Then we'll fight for him, whatever it takes. Alex smiled faintly, impressed by her determination. All right, let's figure out our next move. As they headed back toward Maple Ridge, neither of them noticed the faint glow emanating from the forest behind them, a sign that Spike was still alive, still fighting, and still determined to protect the people he cared about.